Do you have 6 plates up in the air that you're juggling all the time? And you're just holding your breath, hoping none of the plates fall? Maybe you have 2 exams and a paper due this week, as well as a fraternity event and some volunteer work. And your cousin is visiting this weekend to tour the campus, and you've got to host your cousin. So all these things that are coming at you at the same time, all in one week, how do you handle all that stress? How do you keep all those plates up in the air? If that describes you, then today's video will address that scenario. Now, on this teaching series, we've been addressing getting things done, the art of stress-free productivity, or getting things done in a distracting world. The previous videos, we've established the foundation, and then the first step, which is capture, and we've introduced a second step, which asks the question, what is it? What's the stuff? You take the things out of your bucket and you ask yourself one at a time, what is it? And is it actionable? If the answer is no, we've discussed the 4 categories of no. Now, a quick recap. If it's no, then it falls into the category of trash, checklist, someday maybe, or reference. If the answer is yes, it is actionable, then it falls under the category of next action or projects. In our last video, we talked about next action, and we discussed the power of next. If you can get that next action, it gives you the momentum to gain traction and head towards completion. Now, a project is a definition of something that is complete. So remember, in our next actions, we made a list and we found things that follow the 2-minute rule. But there'll be, most of the stuff on there is going to be stuff that is beyond the 2-minute rule. It's going to take more than 2 minutes and more than 1 session to complete. So those are called outcomes or projects. Now, in order to define an outcome, we need to know what it looks like when it's complete. I asked my students, how do you know you're ready for the exam? If you can define ready for the exam, then you have defined your project, your outcome. We don't want to find out if you're ready after the exam. We want to find out if you're ready before the exam. So designing a measuring tool to measure readiness is an example of a project. Now, before I go on, I need to differentiate between a project and goals. We're not talking about bigger goals like the end of the semester 3.0, or being accepted into the nursing program, or being accepted into the business school. Those are bigger goals. I'm talking about just the projects, which are the components of those bigger goals. Now, these projects, let me read you a definition of project. A project is a description of a successful outcome. It's finished. It describes the point at which actions are no longer needed to be tracked. Like turning in an application for grad school. Once you've pushed the submit button, then that project is complete. You cannot resubmit and you can't tweak your submission. So before we go on, we need to kick the perfection boogeyman out the door. Perfectionism is not what we're talking about here. Perfectionism is unhealthy and will only contribute to frustration and anxiety. We're not talking about perfectionism. And to clarify it, let's drill down deep into the true meaning of the word perfect. Perfect comes from the Latin root word and prefix per, in perfect, means thorough or complete. And fect, in perfect, F-E-C-T, comes from the Latin root word that means done. So perfect means completely and thoroughly done. And that's what we're looking for when we're talking about projects or outcomes. We have to define, what does complete look like? What does finished look like? Now, examples of some projects is turn in the essay for your literature class. Complete the lab report for last week's lab. Complete the lab report number 7 for last week's lab. Perfect complete could be find a study group. That would, once you've done it, then you found it. And if it works for you, then you don't need to look anymore. So that's an example of something that is complete. Now, if you can define and have clear in your mind what does complete look like, what does finished look like, then that keeps you in control and in perspective of all the stuff that life throws at you. And that's what we want. We want to keep our operational control and perspective. Remember, perspective means that you know where you're going. Now, projects that get thrown at you are created by different sources. Like your professors create your projects many times, like papers, assignments, etc. Your parents might create some projects for you, like visit your grandmother or call your grandmother, make sure your grandmother hears from you, something like that. Or maybe you even create some projects for yourself, like throw a party for a roommate, or throw a birthday party for my roommate, or get the car ready for a road trip for spring break. So these projects come to you. Doesn't matter who authors the project. You want to keep control over how you respond to this project, how you clarify it so you can put it into next actions. Now, we want to create the conditions so that you can complete it. You want to create the conditions so that you can reach success. We're going to define success as completion. Remember, we're not talking about perfectionism. That is elusive and unrealistic and only leads to anxiety and frustration. Now, we want to define things that are within your control and things that are not in your control. If it's within your control, it's internal factor. It's yours. If it's not in your control, then it's external and you don't have control over it. Like, you don't have control whether the professor asks for a 7-page paper or a 9-page paper. You don't have control if the professor requires 4 exams to complete the course. You don't have control over that. But you do have control over, here's some examples of things you have control over. You have control over how many hours you study. You have control over whether you complete the readings, the assigned readings. And you have control over whether or not you have the contact information for every person in all your classes. In case you miss, you can get the notes. Getting a tutor, you have control over that. Finding a study partner or a study group, you have control of that. Sometimes you need to increase your skill. Maybe your skill level needs to increase. So you have control over increasing your skill level. For example, get better at taking notes. Get better at reading for comprehension so that you can pass the reading quizzes every week. Or get better at studying for this exam, because exam number 1, I studied 10 hours or however many hours, and I still made a whatever grade it was, and you're not happy with that grade. So you have control over increasing your study skill, approach, and strategies. So the things that are within your control, that's what you can act on. You don't have control over maybe how the professor grades your essay, or maybe how the professor if the professor assigns extra credit or not. or if the professor accepts a late paper. So you don't have control over those things. Now, what we want to keep that in mind. If you don't own what you control, then you'll wind up blaming everybody else for your outcome. And I guess you can if you want to, but it won't help your outcome. It won't help you reach what you want to reach. Now, let's a little review here, real quick review. What are we talking about? We're at the yes, it is actionable. What's the next action? And then what are the things that take more than 2 minutes to complete or more than one session? Those are called projects. Now, this is the clarifying stage. This is very fundamental, and this is a thinking stage. This is the part where we are transforming all the stuff that's coming at us from all the different places that stuff comes at us from, and we're transforming it into usable and actionable format. Now, in our next video, we're going to address organize, how to find the parking spaces for all these decisions that we've made. Now, remember, a quick recap. We get the stuff that's coming at us from all directions. We put it in the buckets. And we've talked about that already. And then we pick the stuff one at a time and ask ourselves, what is it? Is it actionable? If the answer is no, then we put it into 4 categories, either trash, checklist, someday maybe, or reference. If the answer is yes, is it actionable? Yes. Then we put it in the category of next actions and projects. We've defined what a project is in today's video, and in the next video, we're going to find these parking spaces for all this thinking that we've done in clarifying all these decisions that we've made. Next step is organize. Once you've learned this process, the clarifying and organizing goes hand in hand, and you'll be doing it simultaneously. When you take the time to do clarifying step, it's going to take time. You want to set aside time in your week, and you want to, like maybe it's going to be Sunday night before the week starts, or maybe first thing Monday morning. So you want to actually make an appointment with yourself to go through clarify step, where you're thinking about what to do with all this stuff. Defining what it is, what the stuff is, and then deciding what to do about it. So in the next video, we're going to talk about organizing. You don't want to miss it. If this has been useful for you, please like my video on this YouTube channel. Please share it with your friends, and go visit me on my Facebook business page, Ruth Bomar, your academic coach.